Imagine a structure so massive it swallows a star, a cage of steel and solar panels, wrapping around a burning sun. With a radius of 100 million miles, it is the ultimate dream of astrophysics, the Type 2 civilization, the Dyson Sphere. To build this in a video game requires simulating millions of individual objects. It requires rendering entire galaxies without a loading screen. It requires a level of mathematical optimization that massive AAA studios with hundreds of employees struggle to achieve. Logically, this game should not exist, or if it did, it should have been built by Ubisoft, or Rockstar, or Blizzard. It wasn't. It was built by 5 people, 5 friends in a small room in Chongqing, China, who had never made a simulation game before. They had no massive budget. They had no marketing team. They barely had a working prototype when they decided to bet their careers on a concept that most engines couldn't handle. This is the story of Dyson Sphere Program. It is a story about the terrifying math of spheres. It is a story about a game engine pushed to its absolute breaking point. And it is the story of how a tiny team obsessed with science fiction accidentally humiliated the biggest companies in the industry. To understand the game, you have to understand the madness of the concept. In 1960, physicist Freeman Dyson proposed a theory. He argued that as a civilization advances, its hunger for energy becomes infinite. Eventually, burning coal, splitting atoms, or even fusion reactors on a planet's surface won't be enough. To truly advance, a species must go to the source. They must capture the entire energy output of their parent star. For Mao Mao, the founder of Youthcat Studio, this wasn't just a theory. It was a romantic obsession. He was living in Chongqing, a city often called Cyberpunk City due to its verticality, neon lights, and mist. But Mao Mao wasn't looking at the city lights. He was looking at the stars. He had founded Youthcat Studio with a simple, almost naive goal: to make a game that captured the romance of the universe. In early 2019, the team consisted of just 5 people. Zhou Xun, the producer, Mao Mao, the creative lead, and 3 others handling art and code. They looked at the market. Factorio dominated the 2D automation genre. Satisfactory was bringing it into 3D. But both of those games had a limit. You were stuck on a map, a flat plane. Maybe a generated world, but still, ground. Youthcat wanted something else. They didn't want you to build a factory on a map. They wanted you to build a factory on a planet, and then fly to another planet, and then another star system. This idea, the seamless transition from micro to macro, sounded beautiful, but from a programming perspective, it was a suicide mission. Most games use skyboxes. When you look at the stars in a standard video game, you're looking at a painted wallpaper. You can't fly there. If you want to go to space, the game usually hits a loading screen, unloads the planet, and loads a space level. Youthcat wanted it to be real. If you see a star in the distance, it's a real place. You can fly there. You can land on it. But they immediately ran into the problem. Computers hate spheres. Screens are flat. Memory arrays are linear. Coordinates are usually X, Y, and Z on a grid. When you try to wrap a square grid around a sphere, everything breaks. Look at a standard globe. Look at the poles. The grid lines get squished together. The squares turn into triangles. In a strategy game, this is a nightmare. Building a factory at the equator would look fine, but as you got closer to the poles, your buildings would warp, overlap, and break. For months, this geometrical nightmare threatened to kill the project before it even started. They couldn't use a standard grid. They had to dive into advanced geometry. They researched something called the Goldberg polyhedron. By mixing hexagons and pentagons, like a soccer ball, but scaled up to millions of tiles, they could create a near-perfect sphere. But near-perfect wasn't enough. They had to write a custom grid system that divided the planet into segments, subtly shifting the grid size as you moved north or south to keep the illusion of consistency. It took months of agonizing math, but they solved it. They had a planet. Now they just had to render 1 million machines on it without the computer melting. Every gamer knows the pain of lag. In automation games, lag is the final boss. When you have 10,000 conveyor belts, 5,000 sorters, and 20,000 drones all moving at once, the CPU screams. Traditionally, game engines like Unity use object-oriented programming. Imagine every single screw in a factory has a name, a personality, and a list of questions it asks every frame. Am I moving? Am I touching something? What color am I? When you have a million screws, the computer spends all its time asking questions and no time drawing the picture. The team at Youthcat knew that if they built Dyson Sphere Program the normal way, it would be unplayable past the first hour. They needed performance. So, they made a risky choice. They decided to use Unity's new experimental tech, DOTS, Data-Oriented Technology Stack. For the non-programmers, imagine instead of asking every screw, "Who are you?" you just have a massive list of coordinates in the memory, and you tell the CPU, "Move everything in this list 1 inch to the right." The CPU loves this. It can process linear data lightning fast. But DOTS was new. It was experimental. The documentation was scarce. The team wasn't just building a game. They were fighting the engine itself. They had to write custom shaders to render tens of thousands of solar sails. In the final game, a Dyson swarm can contain over 100,000 individual solar sails orbiting a star. Each one has a position. Each one calculates physics. Each one reflects light. And the game runs on a mid-tier laptop. They achieve this through a trick called GPU instancing. Instead of telling the graphics card, "Draw this sail, now draw this sail," they say, "Here is one model of a sail. Draw it 50,000 times at these locations." It sounds simple. Implementing it with a team of 5 people while designing a complex economy was an act of masochism. Zhou Xun later admitted that the optimization process was a constant war. Every new feature threatened to tank the frame rate. But they had a philosophy. The scale must not be compromised. If the player can't build a sphere that blocks out the sun, there is no point. While the programmers were fighting with memory allocation, the artists were building a reason why. Why are we building this sphere? Most factory games are about capitalism. You build to sell. You build to expand. Dyson Sphere Program is different. It is about survival. The backstory is surprisingly deep, hidden in the tech logs and intro sequences. In the game's timeline, humanity no longer exists in flesh and blood. We have uploaded our consciousness into a massive supercomputer called the CentreBrain. We live in a virtual paradise. No war, no hunger, no pain, just pure data. But there is a catch. Simulating billions of human minds requires energy, unfathomable amounts of electricity. The virtual world is real, but the electricity that powers it must come from the physical universe. If the power goes out, humanity is deleted. That is where you come in. You are Icarus, a light industrial mecha. You are sent back into the cold, hard physical reality. Your job is simple. Go to a star cluster, strip mine the planets, and build a Dyson sphere to beam energy back to the CentreBrain. You are the electrician for the Matrix. There's a subtle melancholy to the game. You land on pristine worlds with flowing water and alien trees, and you pave them over. You pump the oceans dry for hydrogen. You burn the forest for thermal power. You turn nature into a machine. The game doesn't judge you for it, but it makes you watch. It captures the duality of industrialism, the destruction of the natural world, in service of a magnificent artificial sun. Late 2020, the gaming world was on fire, but for the wrong reasons. Cyberpunk 2077 had just launched in a disastrous state. Gamers were cynical. They were tired of broken promises, unfinished early access titles, and roadmap lies. Into this hostile atmosphere, Youthcat Studio prepared to launch Dyson Sphere Program into early access on January 21st, 2021. They were nervous. They were a Chinese indie studio in a market dominated by Western developers. Factorio was the king. Satisfactory was the prince. Who would care about a grid-based sphere game? They hoped for a few thousand sales. Enough to pay for instant noodles and keep the servers running. Within hours of launch, the Steam servers lit up. It wasn't just a ripple, it was a shockwave. Players were stunned, not by the features, but by the polish. In an era where AAA games crashed on startup, this 400 megabyte game from a 5-person team ran flawlessly. It loaded instantly. It allowed you to fly from a planet to a moon without a single stutter. The word of mouth was electric. It's 3D Factorio, but you can fly. Within 4 days, they sold 200,000 copies. Within a few months, 1.5 million. The team in Chongqing was shell-shocked. They spent the Chinese New Year holiday not celebrating but frantically patching bugs for hundreds of thousands of players. But they had a new problem. Players finished the content. They built the sphere, and then they asked, now what? Where are the enemies? For 2 years, Dyson Sphere Program was a cozy game. There were no enemies, no biters, no creepers, just you, the stars, and your logistics. Many players loved this. They called it Zen mode. But the developers had a vision. They always intended to add combat. This is the most dangerous moment in game development, changing the core loop of a successful game. If they made the combat too hard, the cozy players would quit. If they made it too easy, the hardcore players would get bored. They introduced the rise of the dark fog. The lore expanded. The CentreBrain wasn't the only supercomputer. There was a rogue system, a self-replicating artificial intelligence that saw matter only as fuel for its own growth. The dark fog. Suddenly, you weren't alone in the cluster. You would land on a planet and find them already there, drilling, growing. It turned the game from a sandbox into a war for territory. The update was massive. It introduced physics-based combat, planetary shields, turrets, space fleets. The team had to optimize not just the factory, but thousands of laser projectiles and enemy pathfinding AI. Remember, they were still a tiny team, though they had grown slightly by now. When the update dropped in late 2023, the player count spiked again. They had successfully grafted a real-time strategy game onto a factory game. They proved that the cozy builders could become warriors if you gave them big enough lasers. But combat isn't why people stay. They stay for the feeling. There is a moment in every Dyson Sphere Program playthrough that changes you. It's the first time you leave your home planet. You stock up on fuel, you engage the sail drive, you break the atmosphere. The music swells, a mix of synth and awe. And you see your home planet recede into a tiny dot. You see the gas giant looming ahead. You see the star burning in the distance. You realize how small you are. And then, 40 hours later, you return to that star. But now, you aren't small. You have surrounded the star with rings of steel. You have turned the planets into engines. You have conquered the celestial body that gave you life. It is a power fantasy, yes, but it is one earned through math, logistics, and planning. The game succeeds because it respects the player's intelligence. It doesn't hold your hand. It hands you a galaxy and says, optimize this. And in doing so, it creates a sense of ownership that few games match. That structure around the star, it's not a skybox. You placed every node, you launched every sail. It is your monument. Dyson Sphere Program is more than just a good game. It is a lesson for the industry. In an era of bloated budgets, 1,000-person teams, and quadruple A failures, Youthcat Studio proved that focus beats financing. They picked one mechanic, scale, and perfected it. They didn't try to make a movie. They made a simulation. They remind us that the roots of PC gaming are in the garage, in the bedroom, in the cramped office in Chongqing. They remind us that 5 people with a passion for physics can build a universe that millions want to live in. The CentreBrain is waiting. The simulation needs power, and the factory must expand to the stars. This story of Youthcat Studio is just one of thousands in the hidden history of game development. If you want to know how Stardew Valley was built by one man who taught himself to draw, or how Hollow Knight was funded by mortgaging a house, then you are in the right place. I need you to click that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We are building a library of these stories, and you don't want to miss the next chapter. Leave a comment below. What is the most impressive megastructure you've ever built in a game? I read every single one. Thanks for watching. Keep building.